welcome back to The Perspective. Still with me is CEO of Qooco, Mr. David Topolewski. Mr. David, what kind of support has Qooco seen from the government, if any at all?
They've actually been, and this is really across the region,
Right.
really not involved at all. I think that they have a lot of issues that they're trying to deal with, and they're just really not on top of mobile learning, never mind e-learning even. So I think it's going to take some time for them to catch up and really see the impact of this. I think where you're going to see a lot more innovation is really directly with the parents and having them see, wow, what an improvement my child is making with this. And then really sharing this with, whether it's parent-teacher associations or schools, and then really having this bubble up to the top and saying, wow, this needs to be something national.
Okay. But has Qooco made any efforts to reach out to the government and say, it's like, hey, look at this new way of learning?
We have made a few efforts in a number of countries, and it's pretty challenging, to be honest. And I don't think this is unique to Asia. We haven't, as an example, in the U.S. there's a huge English as a second language market, and we haven't touched that because it's just so political and just so bureaucratic. So this is just something that's going to take time, and we don't say this is good or bad. It's just the reality. Right.
Are there any challenges, any other challenges that Qooco faces in trying to implement this digital learning platform?
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest challenge is really a mindset change, because if you step back and look at this, you've got parents that know little or nothing about language learning, and they're making decisions. And so I use these examples going to Japan, going back to Japan 30 years ago in the mid 80s when they really started learning English. No improvement in 30 years. Korea in the 90s, no improvement. And they've just been repeating the same thing over and over again. And it's like, well, they were doing this, and well, they're doing it, so it must be good. But in fact, it's not good. And what's critical is changing the process, because the old way, which has never worked and it's never going to work, is using this once a week. And the entire, almost the entire English language learning business is built on once a week. And there's just no basis for it.
Okay. Learning a language in English specifically, like you can't just do it once in a week. It's kind of a frequency kind of thing. You kind of have to do it over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely critical. And you raise a very good point, because if you look at any reputable university doing any type of language learning, first 2 years it's every single day in a small class plus a bunch of work outside the classroom. And then you look at the typical language school once a week. It's like these are logically incompatible, and so parents in particular need to get away from this mindset and look and be much more focused on data-driven results. What's the evidence that this works? Ask these guys to show me that you're actually learning, and we have data on hundreds of thousands of students to prove this.
All right, so if a teacher comes up to Qooco and says, hey, show me that the digital learning works, you guys will be able to kind of, hey, this is the result that we have.
Exactly. We've got just a staggering amount of data on this. We've given our data to professors that look at it objectively. It's like, okay, here's a control group, here's this group. But let's compare how they've done.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. What kind of data? Do you mind sharing a little bit about the kind of data that you've
happy.
acquired?
So we do pre-tests, and so and the data that we acquire, everything the student says, how many times they attempted this, what their problem was. We have a ton of data on every interaction they're doing, and this is important because this allows what's called formative assessment. So 99% of the assessment that's is what's called summative assessment, which is really endpoint testing. So almost all your thing like a TOEFL score or an SAT, those are all a point score. You get a score, but it doesn't tell you how to improve. We have formative assessment, which tells you, oh, I need to improve this specific thing. This is what I'm not learning. These are pronunciation problems. So it's very, very granular. And this is very powerful for a teacher, because then they can act as a coach and say, oh, this is where you need to focus. I want you to look at these. I want you to do these specific lessons, because this is where you're going to be helpful. Not, here's your score, it's 600, or it's a B. that's not
Yeah, but does it
actionable
really tell you
information.
why you got to be?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
And then the data, would they have to ask Qooco specifically to get some of that data, or is it available after using the Qooco platform after a while?
It's all in a dashboard. So
Okay.
the more you use it, the more data you have.
Right.
And over time we build up correlations in terms of what particular problems, because sometimes you may have a one-off and it's really not a problem. There could be a number of reasons for that, but as you build up more data, you have more confidence in that and say, okay, you need to focus on this.
Since the dawn of internet a few decades ago, digital learning is sort of still being developed, or is it's sort of new? Can we call it sort of new into the industry?
I would say it's still the beginning of the beginning,
Right.
because I'd say initially stuff was just taken from books and say, oh, here this is. Then it's slightly more interactive, and I think the publishers in particular have been incredibly slow in development because they saw it as a new medium, and then there's some really powerful stuff that can be done in terms of analytics and adaptive learning, but you need a lot more content to do that, because if you don't have it, it's not going to be effective. And so there's a lot of learning that has to be done there, but I think we take a lot of techniques from the video game industry to
Right.
drive engagement, because for certain things you can learn relatively quickly. Language is like a skill.
Right.
Just like golf is a skill. You don't get to watch a video and suddenly you're a good golfer,
Right.
or watching a marathon and say, okay,
takes
now I can run. Practice. And so this is why it's really important, to do this over and over again, but get good feedback, and that's what coaches are really good at, is
Right.
providing that feedback.
And since you since the digital learning is sort of, like you said a little bit earlier, is the beginning of the beginning, what steps do you think Qooco will be taking in the future to further develop it?
So AI is a very big buzzword right now, and I'd say the hype is ahead of reality, but eventually the reality will get ahead of the hype, and so there is going to be a tremendous opportunity to take AI and personalized learning for students,
Right.
and really deliver much better results, really driven by what the needs of the students are. And there are going to be other things, I think, in terms of virtual reality and maybe
Right.
augmented reality that are going to be very good. And we expect to see a lot more collaboration. And one exciting thing that we're quite interested in doing is having some peer-to-peer learning. And this is, to motivate more learning, not so much teacher to teacher,
Right.
but across cultures, and we want to encourage the friendships between countries. So, for
Right.
example, if we have, and we as we do lots of schools that we work with in China, well, if we're doing peer-to-peer there, these kids are going to go into Chinese because it's easy.
Right.
But if we have
If you
a
pair
gr-
them with somebody from
Indonesia and Vietnam, guess what? Their only
You're gonna have
common
to speak
language
English.
is English, and so so that's going to drive that. But it's also going to drive friendships, and what we see is really opening up opportunities for these kids to collaborate. They're young now, but who knows? One of them might be a PhD student somewhere there, and another one's a doctor there, and they're going to be
Right.
solving a cancer problem
Right.
or an engineering problem, and that's really what this is all about, is to really create tremendous opportunities
for
across culture.
people across various countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do you see digital learning in the future? Do you think it will replace physical learning?
No, I would say we see it as really complementing physical learning, and I think it's going to depend to some extent on the particular students. So I think if they're very young, there's going to be a lot more socialization and group work and whatnot, and as they get older and into middle school and high school, there's going to be somewhat less of that, but I think you'll see a lot of virtual environments,
Right.
and it may not be sort of headsets, virtual environment, but it could be a room that's virtual, and so
Right.
here's your guy who's in the UK, here's a guy from New York.
So it's more of a community kind of thing. You put all these various people from
Yeah,
various different
exactly.
places in one place.
Exactly, and they're going to feel like they're we can't reach out and touch each other, but they're going to feel
But at
that,
least we
that
can
close.
interact with you.
Yeah, and it's going to be the basis for a tremendous amount of collaboration.
Right. Well, it's an amazing thing that Qooco is doing, I think, and I look forward to seeing the development of it, where it's going to be in the future. Mr. David, thank you so much for joining me on The Perspective. And that's all we have for you today on The Perspective. Thank you for joining us.